San Quentin's death row houses some of the most notorious inmates in our nation, and it is rare that the media is allowed inside with open access to talk to any of the prisoners. After years of requesting entry, our Alicia Reed had the opportunity to go in and to talk to inmates and to staff. She joins us now with a look at what happens behind the walls of death row. Alicia.
Pam, most people have probably never been to prison, let alone the cell block that houses death row inmates. These men, all convicted of brutal crimes, are simply waiting to be executed. I was offered a unique opportunity to go behind the prison walls to see what life is like, stranded on death row. San Quentin State Prison, nestled on the shores of San Francisco Bay in Marin County. Some of California's most dangerous criminals call this place home. Over 700 of them sit on death row.
I confessed, I pled guilty, and I've said from the outset that I deserve capital punishment, you know.
Some notorious California killers are locked up here. The Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, a serial killer, rapist, and burglar. He died of cancer in 2013. Wesley Shermantine, one of the Speed Freak killers. Richard Allen Davis, who kidnapped and killed 12-year-old Polly Klaas. He is the reason for California's 3 strikes law. And Scott Peterson, probably the most recognized death row inmate. In 2002, he brutally murdered and dismembered his wife, Lacey, and their unborn son, Connor. He dumped their remains in San Francisco Bay. It's a story that gripped the nation. He was convicted and sentenced to die by lethal injection. More than a decade later, Scott Peterson is just another inmate. He's the one in the center of your screen, hiding behind a hat and shades as our cameras were rolling. Sitting in his tiny cell, Douglas Clark, a.k.a. the Sunset Strip Killer. He and his girlfriend, Carol Bundy, were convicted of a series of gruesome murders targeting prostitutes in Los Angeles back in the early 80s. He says he didn't do it.
Severed head of a girl, semen and sperm from an A-positive donor. I'm O-positive. I have alibis for 2 other murders, no problem. So I can win. That's why I've been 22 years in federal court without moving an inch.
With barely room between the bed and the wall, there's a limited amount of space to move around in these cells. And even with this solid door protecting me from the inmates, I still had to wear a Teflon vest and a plastic face mask. Guards took no chances when it came to protecting me and themselves from any harm. Outside, Steve Lividitis says he's a changed man. But that was a much different story 30 years ago.
I didn't care for other people's lives.
He robbed a Beverly Hills jewelry store and killed 3 employees.
I was an evil person. I don't know any other way to put it.
Lividitis calls himself evil and says he deserves his punishment. He and Scott Peterson share the same yard, and you might be surprised, a small group has certain freedoms the other condemned inmates don't. I'll tackle that part of the story tomorrow night and dig a little deeper into the lives of the men stranded on death row. Pam.